Welcome back to another episode of the Price of Admission podcast, where we explore stories of service, sacrifice, and the true costs throughout our life's journey. Today, I'm joined by Chris Izant, a man whose path has taken him to and from the advisor mission in Afghanistan, southern Helmand Province. And now he's an FBI special agent. Along the way, Chris has firsthand seen moments where leadership's faltered and history has shifted. His new book, Final Engagement, A Marine's Last Mission in the Surrender of Afghanistan, sheds light on the forgotten truths from our withdrawal from Afghanistan and offers an honest, ground-level perspective that's been missing from the broader conversation. So here we go. Chris Izant. Azdidani Shuma Hoshadam. What was that? What I just said? Do you remember what that means?
Oh, man. Oz is from Zidami, you said?
Yeah,
I got pieces together. Say it again.
Azdidani Shuma Hoshadam.
So I think that's from meeting you, I've become happy. Nice to meet you. Is that right?
Nice to meet you. There you go. So you're
sorry, I got to go literal first and then come out.
Nice.
The term they taught us was Pelidomo Khoshhalshwam. So I mean, we had them teach us the southern dialect of Pashto, and like Dari and Pashto dialects are all over the place, and
Right.
You really made me reach to the depths of my brain to come up with that.
I don't remember a lot of Dari because I was a Dari guy.
Yeah.
That was one I use all the time. Nice to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had to look it up again to remember. But anyways, welcome, FBI Special Agent Chris Izant on the Price of Admission today. He's the third author of a book that I've gotten on. So here it is, Final Engagement, A Marine's Last Mission in the Surrender of Afghanistan. So we'll get into some of that today. I'm going to touch on your story. You're an advisor to the Afghan Border Police team in southern Helmand, right down at the bottom of the hook. I was an advisor at the same time period as you. You were working with Border Police. I was working with Afghan Army. Again, different dialects, different regions and where they come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about that. I was at the Class E outpost with a DFAP. I was one of those FOBITs, Fob Dwyer, partnered with the ANA. And that was July 2012 to 2013.
Oh, so we were there at the same time then. We dipped in there, and our I think we were stalled out on the tarmac there for maybe like a whole day at one point. So
yeah,
should have come and found you. The chow there is pretty good.
Yeah, it was. Wasn't too bad. I actually got pretty swole with the weight room and the food, so it wasn't bad.
I tell people that the best shape I've ever been in my life was when I was in Afghanistan. You take away all the garbage, all the alcohol, like bad habits, and you give some extra time to just work on yourself. It's amazing what you can do.
No doubt, for sure. You and I also went through the basic school together in Quantico, right? We're going to hit your life story, get into a little bit about your book. Obviously, most folks that listen into this podcast likely have some interest on the discussion or thoughts about the war in Afghanistan, which you've put into a book, which is really good content because it's not just like even like a podcast it's a one and go, but it's edited, it's revised, it's lots of thought gets put into that. But first, tell us your story, man. Go back as far as you want to.
All right. Well, it was a cold December day in 1987, and let me fast forward from there. I grew up in Syracuse, New York. One of four brothers, three more plus me. Good suburb. Parents both doctors, and was raised on this track of you're going to college, you're going to be somebody. Then 9/11 happened. Kind of got me thinking about as an eighth grade at the time, how is this going to factor into my life? What's all this mean? And got curious on it. So I was in high school. I started getting like some Learn Arabic book on tape type stuff. And, I knew I wanted to study that. I wanted to go into something.
That's what you studied.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was a major.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I went to college and was like, I know what I want to do in the world. I want I want to make a difference. I want to figure out what's going on with these terrorists that knocked our towers down when I was 13, understand what's going on there and see if I can, have some role in preventing that from happening again.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, mom and dad, I really want to go in the military. And they're like, absolutely not. You're going to college. And so I did. But when I was there, I was, a little more independent, started thinking about, do I really want to look back on my life and wonder, what if I had done that or wish I had? And there are plenty of guys who had opportunities in the past 20 years to get in the fight and for whatever reason didn't or couldn't, and look back and wish they had. And that's the feeling that I really wanted to avoid. So, freshman year, I joined, signed up for the officer candidate school, the juniors and seniors program, where you do like 6 weeks one summer and then you go back for another 6 weeks. And in the meantime, I said, this is the fight I want to be in. I got to prepare myself for that fight. Like I saw college. I wasn't really thinking too far down the road. So I was studying all Middle Eastern Islamic studies, Arabic. I studied some Dari and Farsi as well, and some Arabic dialects, studied abroad in Jordan, and got really smart on that stuff just in time for the Iraq war to end. So, when we got to the basic school, it was like the surge in Afghanistan, and that was the fight everyone was going to in the Marine Corps. So a little bit of tinkering. Once you learn one of those languages, it's a little bit easier to pivot onto the others. And so that's what I did. That's where we met, down in Bravo Company, 1st Platoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, no doubt. I think back to TBS. I'm thinking, man, feels like a long time ago. Well, shoot, it is. I mean, how long ago was that? It was
This was like 13, 14 years
13,
ago.
14 years ago. Went by like that. Feels.
Yeah. Those memories come right back though, man. And part of my book, I was going and pulling old emails and like doing some research from the time. And, when you pull up those stories and like, I looked at some photos from our like mess night. And I remembered like, oh yeah, I remember I got up and fined one of the women in our platoon for like, she'd like thrown up or something. And I made all these like artillery jokes about, negligent discharges, and like the whole story came back to me. I never thought about that for like over a decade.
Yeah.
So it's one of those cool things where you can get right back in it, and just with one little trigger.
Yeah. Well, at TBS, did you have any fun standout memories by chance that stick out? Or
I mean, definitely the mess night was, in the Hawk. That was always a good time. As far as our like field ops, one of those memories, I think we were in like the platoon defense. We're digging in Quantico and trying to find the hole that some lieutenant dug 5 years ago where the earth's a little bit softer. And
was it on a ridge?
Yeah.
It was on a ridge. Okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well, we were out on that when we all found out that Osama bin Laden got killed. Like we were in the field when in May 2011. And that was a moment for me. Like people were like partying, but also people were a little bit like sad. They're like, oh man, I don't know if we're going to get to go to the war after all this.
It's coming to an end.
Yeah. Maybe. So that was a unique point in time. Well, yeah, gotcha. I mean, there are a lot of good memories out of TBS, a lot of good people.
And then you got, you go through TBS, you do the IOC thing, infantry officer course. How was that experience for you? I've had a few others that have spoke about that experience on here.
Yeah, man, IOC was a religious experience. Like literally, I was raised Catholic, and going to church every Sunday. I went to Boston College, it was a Catholic school, but I never really grew up into faith until I was at IOC and really needed it. Like nice. It was tough. And I remember I got medevaced at one point and I was like, oh, great. Like I can't start over again. Like I can't go back to the beginning. I'm going to miss a day of training. And like, this is it for me. And it was like the skin on my feet had like degloved during a hike and then got infected over 2 days out doing ranges and stuff. It's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm gonna be the best damn Lago the Marine Corps ever saw. Like whenever I get rebranched, I was like, I can't start over IOC again. It was like It was brutal. It was one of those things like it's formative, but I couldn't. I mean, I was like built to be a doctor. Both my parents are doctors. I'm like a science nerd. Like, what was I doing there? It was a break off, but it was like seeing the guys next to you and in front of you and behind you who are like, hey man, take my M4. I'll take your M4 with the 203. Maybe that extra like 2 pounds is gonna help you when they see you're suffering, stuff like that. And then just believing like, I take this next step, I'll get the next one, and ended up going to like church more. We got like 5 days off that whole summer, and I was like going to mass. I was like, yes, someone's got to help me here. I'm going to get through this. And I couldn't do it alone. But yeah, man, there was. I'm not sure how much we're supposed to talk about IOC or how much different it's been. But back in the day, it was a big hush hush thing. Like, you can't tell anyone what goes on in IOC because you're going to ruin the training value for people that come after you, and it's all shrouded in mystique, which is part of why it's so intimidating. But
it sounds like it was a good thing.
It was really good. I mean, I what it taught me, more than just the technical lessons and weapons and leadership, was like failure is a choice you make in your head. And at one point I had some self-loathing about that, because I was like, why? Because I felt like my heart was going to beat up, like just burst through my chest at one point. We were humping so much weight, going so fast. And I was like, I'm not made for this, but like, I am too proud to quit. So I'm going to die in a training accident because I am too proud. I'm afraid of that shame I would feel if I like fell out or like said I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm feeling in the moment. But then at the end of the day, like I made it through there. My heart didn't explode. It felt like it was going to, but you just keep pushing, and like, I made it. So in my head, I was like so close to choosing failure. And you just got to like, people, what's that phrase people say, like, embrace the suck. Like, that's the only way to get through it.
Yeah. So it probably increased your radius bubble of perseverance, and what your failure bubble acceptance might have been.
It did. Yeah. I mean, it totally changed my attitudes too. Like, I mean, everyone that graduates IOC, you're, brand new platoon commander going to, some rifle platoon usually. And there's a reason why all those guys, myself included at the time, your ego is huge, because you pretty much just like walked on water and you feel invincible. And that's exactly, I think it's by design. Like, you want every platoon commander to feel that empowered and confident going out into the fleet for the first time. Because if you're insecure and you're in charge of a bunch of, crusty old war veterans, they're going to run all over you. So I think it's also by design. But yeah, the lesson taught me is like, you literally can do anything until your body fails. Like, let your body fail, because up until that point, like, it's just choices that you make. And it was really empowering in that way, like the kind of message it set to go through something like that and come out on the other side.
Nice. So IOC's done. You get your first assignment. Where does that take you?
1st Battalion, 5th Marines, out in Camp Pendleton, California, up on the northern end of the base in the Camp San Mateo area. The 5th Marine Regiment has its own little house there. And it was the day I checked in was the day the battalion came back from Sangin District on one of their roughest deployments in the whole GWAT. So
Tom Schumann not come back with that group?
He came back with 3-5.
Okay.
So 1-5 replaced 3-5. And then, yeah, and I mean, 3-5 had a rough one. And that was during the winter. So they ripped out in like March, April with 1-5, and they went in for the summer fighting season, and they got it. I mean, they learned a ton from what those guys paid in 3-5. 1-5 learned all those lessons and brought them to bear, but it was still a grind. And then, I think there were 9 of us from my IOC class, all showed up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to whoop some ass. And the message we got was like, just chill for like a couple of months. These guys, we're going to go to the rifle range. We're going to do their Marine nets. Like, I know you guys are all hard charging now, but like, read the room. Like, this is time for these guys to unwind. So
yeah, that makes sense, because Tom was on my advisor team. So
he was.
Yeah, the rotation Now it makes sense to me. I don't know why I asked that, but I did.
So he volunteered then for IA billet after. Was
Yeah, I
yours an
think
IA advisor?
he went from 352 check into recon, and at that time, someone had to go. He was just showing up, and he ended up being with us.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that guy's an amazing story. I first read about it in one of Bing West, like embedded with 3.5, and wrote a book, 1 Million Steps. Have you read that one, or you heard of it?
I haven't.
Yeah.
1 million steps.
Yeah, and that's like I haven't read every book on the topic, but as far as what was Sangin like for the Marines and the Brits that were there beforehand, he's probably like 80 years old at the time. God bless the guy. He was in there like out at the PBs, debriefing patrols and stuff.
I just hope I'm alive by that time.
I know that would be
go
such
through
a
something
gift.
like that.
Yeah.
Like so you show up and kind of take us from there.
Yeah, so we get told pretty early on, like the next pump we're signed up for is the 31st MEU, which for your listeners that don't know, I'm using a lot of acronyms now, but that's the Marine Amphibious Tour. Where you start in
Get on a
Okinawa
ship.
for this
You
one.
are ready
Get
to
on a
go
ship,
wherever they say, right?
And you can do some cool missions.
Standby.
You can do some cool training, but you're mostly just floating around. And that's coming out of IOC all full of piss and vinegar. I was like, that doesn't sound like what I really wanted to do. Like, thinking back to like my motivations for joining, what I studied in college, I'm testing, I think I was like 2+ in Arabic, and I was like, I'm going to go sit on a boat. But like, I also know, well, that's what you signed up for. Like, you don't get to choose your billet. Like, you're at the Marine Corps' discretion. But for me, I was still like, I had that itch. I was like, I want to get to the fight. So, and other lieutenants felt that way too, but it's one of those weird, it's awkward because you're just so grateful to have, platoon command and to like not be in training and finally make it to the fleet. It's like almost a year of training to get there. And then there's like the politics in the officer corps of like, you don't want to be a squeaky wheel when you first show up somewhere. Like, I'm sure logistics is the same way, like infantry officers, it's a small group, like everyone knows who everyone else is, and that wasn't a reputation that I wanted to gain for myself. So I was quiet for months, just like, I'm going to do a good job with these Marines, like we're going to train them up, we're going to kick ass on the MEU. Then there kept coming these taskers from division. It was like, you need to send a couple bodies to staff and advisor team going to Afghanistan. And initially, like the first tasker came down, all the company officers and staff NCOs are sitting around talking about who they're going to send, and I'm like, man, I really wish I had the balls to volunteer. Can I say balls on here? You got a lot of kids listening to this, all right? I was like, I wish I had the balls to volunteer, but I didn't want to like rub people the wrong way and seem ungrateful for the position I was in, so I let that pass. But I thought about it. I was like, man, did I just miss my opportunity to get in the fight? So the next time it came up, I said in like a joking way to the gunny, I was like, hey, sign me up for that turret gunner billet. Like, I think I'd do really good behind the 50 cal. And he was like, well, sir, actually there are some officer billets. And so I was like, all right, sign me up for one of those. Like, let's go. And I kind of said it in a lighthearted way. I was like, is this guy serious? But then I like made it clear to my XO afterwards. I was like, I'm serious about that. If you guys need to send someone, like, I know Dari, I know a little bit of Dari, and I can build from there, and I think I'd be good at it. So I had to annoy the battalion XO. Eventually they're told like, yeah, we're going to send you if we get, if we're required to. Right now it was kind of like fluid. They weren't really sure if they had to cough any bodies up or who they're going to be. But after that point, like I talked to my CO, the commanding officer. I was like, I'm really thinking about this. I really want to do it. Like, what do you think? And he was like, well, sleep on it before you like put in for certain, because it'll derail your whole career. Like, you're not going to be a platoon commander again, most likely. This is like a time where you're going to develop your skills and like your leadership style. Like, your platoon command time is like, it's not something I would like throw away lightly. And so like, I did think about that, and it was like a huge trade-off. because obviously if I had choice between going to Afghanistan as platoon commander and going as an advisor, you know, I've just been training for a year essentially to be a platoon commander. That's obviously what I'm going to do, but
Yeah.
that wasn't the choice. And so it was a little more complicated, but at the time I knew like they were already starting the withdrawal, and combat deployments for, infantry battalions were getting more and more rare. And I really did see it as my last chance to get in the fight. And the advisor mission in particular seemed really cool to me because that's going to be the guys that are force multipliers, like making the difference and seeing like, can this fight be sustained by the locals?
Yeah.
So I thought about it. I kind of already made my decision at that point, but then told him, yeah, like send me.
Are you glad you did that?
Definitely. I don't regret that at all. I mean, my life would be very different if I didn't have that experience going to Afghanistan as an advisor. It'd be different in so many ways. Like I can't imagine where I would have ended up. I don't know if I would have stayed in the military until I retired or what would have happened, but it was definitely the right call for me. I really appreciated the experience that I got.
Yeah.
But
what was your biggest takeaway from that? Like after that deployment, you came back, and maybe it took a couple years to soak in, but you're like, man, if I hadn't have gone on this advisor mission, I wouldn't have learned this. What was this?
I think I matured a ton.
Okay.
And it wasn't in the, the popular sense of, this wartime experience turns you from like a chipper, naive, motivated officer to some, jaded, old, burnt out veteran with PTSD. I think my maturity was like more around what my role was going to be, like what circumstances are outside my control, how much I want to like rebel against those circumstances versus just kind of focus on what I can change in the day to day. And while I was deployed, like I wanted to do certain missions, I wanted to do certain things. I thought that I was going to be able to have certain experiences, and I thought the fight that I was joining was different than what it actually was.
It's kind of like a Sully, it's whatever moment, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I didn't talk to Sully but he's been on your podcast before.
Yes, KC Milton. So in the book,
you outed him.
Episode 53. Yeah. No, I mean I don't think he's not. That's his thing. That was his thing at the time. It's whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's whatever is like really like it's whatever. It's like we all got a thing that helps us get over some bullshit. And as things change, and all right, we got to shift focus, whatever it is. Or hey, I've just discovered. You said matured. I think about that from a how do I not let this get at me? Because especially everybody that I get on this podcast that cut from a different cloth when it comes to, I want to succeed. I'm going to do whatever it takes to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be those moments where you got to lose a battle to win the war. And I just like listening to those types of stories.
It was definitely that moment. It was like out of a Scorsese movie. It's like this twist you never saw coming. And for me, it was like while we were there, I'm like, I'm here and we're going to win this fight. Like, all the public messaging, all the reporting in the news media, it's always like, the Afghans are getting ready to stand on their own. And the Marines did an awesome job kicking Taliban's ass to buy some time to train these guys up. And now we're doing it and we're doing a good job. We're getting ready to hand it over. We've got the base withdrawal timeline. Everyone's saying that here's the timeline, but we're still going to do it conditions based. We're not going to, if we need to flex, we will. And all that talk, I really believed it. And, come to find out, it was like pulling back the curtain and seeing not just, seeing the Afghans not being ready, but seeing
makes you read things differently.
Yeah.
Like everything.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist type of guy, but it's just, just be careful what you listen to. Be careful what you consider.
And who you believe and what their motivations are and their incentives. But in the Marine Corps, like, especially being a junior officer, like you've bought into the legacy and the esprit de corps and like
Yeah.
the authority of a battalion commander or a regimental commander or like 2-star generals in charge of all Marines in Helmand, like at the time when I was there. And what they're saying is it was so in contrast with my experience on the ground and their own decision making. And by that, I guess I should talk about like what the risk tolerance was at the time.
Sure. Yeah, I wrote something down
Yeah.
about that too, because it's not just going in to advise buddy and all that. There was a lot of those green on blue attacks that were happening at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
something from your book that I took note of was 15%. This is 2012. Okay,
Right.
so that was the year that deployment took place. 15% of all coalition deaths were green on blue. So that means advisor, supporting battalion, U.S. Marine Army, whatever, got killed by an Afghan, say, insider, somebody wearing the Afghan uniform fighting the Taliban. Right?
That's right. And it was right before we deployed that they put the I think it was the ALP, the Afghan local police. They put the whole advising mission on hold. They pulled the advisors out at
Yeah.
some point because it was getting so bad, and we were all like wondering whether we were even going to deploy. We were at 29 Palms doing our final workup exercises there, and it was so bad. Like we were like, okay, I guess our mission's going to get scrapped because there's this calculus that like, is it worth exposing our guys? Is this mission worth exposing Marines and other coalition partners? And for what? And so like it ended up just being like, hey, we're gonna look at some forest protection issues and like we're gonna stand back up and get this ball rolling. Um, but yeah, it was that bad. So I think that played into a lot of what they're allowing advisors to do at the time. And by the time I got there, whenever we were like we weren't like sharing rooms with these guys. Even when we were sleeping on the same patrol base, we had our own internal security stood up. We were like in a
Yeah.
we put our trucks in a circle and slept in the middle and had 2 guys up at all times. So we were very like aware of that threat. But the risk tolerance and like countrywide, not even just with green on blues, I went in there believing like, hey, we're Marines, we're here to do a mission. But every time I wanted to do that mission and we ran those mission cards up to higher, the battalion commander owning that battle space was like, I don't know, that you guys are advisors, not war fighters. Like,
Yeah.
just why don't you just advise them and you don't need to do combat operations. Like, you're not here to kill Taliban. And I was like, well, that's news to me because I'm a Marine advisor and the Marine comes first and I'm Marine first and foremost. Like in our training workups, we learned a lot of the cultural stuff and the advising mission, but so much of it was just like doing our own TTPs, being squared away so we could operate as a team, um, on foot patrols, on convoys, doing all that. But I went in there believing like, hey, we're going to do this mission. And then it seemed like all the decisions from higher were like, yeah, we're saying we're doing this mission, but like we're I don't want any more dead Marines on my watch. So like we all know that the timeline's not going to change. So if that's a given, then why would we continue to like do risky things if we know that we're getting out the same point no matter what the conditions are of the Afghans, what they are of the Taliban security situation. So at the time I was like really mad because I found it like insulting that the battalion commander would tell us like, you're not war fighters. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, look at me. I'm covered in like 40 mic and 5.56 and radios and have all these weapons and like that's what I'm here to do. And I was really mad if some of our missions got shot down. But the more I thought about it, especially in the past 3 years, I actually like get it a little bit more. Like what I still don't appreciate and can't forgive is the duplicity involved, like this public messaging versus the private like decision making. I still think that that's really not forgivable. But
Yeah.
when it comes to making that risk calculus and saying like, actually, I see the writing on the wall here, and I've already had 1 Marine killed on a raid in Marja on my watch, and I know that I'm being told that these combat outposts are coming down, we're pulling back. forces, like you guys are the last advisors to be out here with this team. You're coming home no matter what. Um, I see that that's the finality, no matter what we do in the meantime. So why would I do anything in the meantime that's going to send a dead Marine home? Like, I want to bring everyone back alive. Like, that's my mission now. Once I can see that, the mission on paper isn't going to be achieved, or the mission is just the timeline, that second part of being a Marine officer, like, you got your mission, the second part is take care of your Marines. Like, that's the part that's going to override. So looking back, I understand that with a lot more empathy than I did at the time, because I just wanted to,
Yeah.
like, get out there and kick some ass. Um, so that's part of the maturity, I think, that, it hit me on the deployment a little bit, but even more so, like, reflecting on the deployment, that, like, those guys were put in a tough position, and I think, like, the decisions were correct, but like I said, that deceitful messaging still pisses me off.
And some of that you wrote about in your book. Let's get into that. Let's talk a little bit more about the book.
Yeah.
What made you want to write it? What was the moment you're like, I got to write this. I got to do it. And you did it.
Yeah. So the fall of Kabul really stopped me and forced me to look back on that deployment a lot harder than I had been.
Yeah.
I finished up in the Marine Corps and got out and was just looking forward. Like, I want to do something different, and want to move on in my career. And I'd done that, and I'd started a family, and I had all these things going for me. I feel like I'd successfully made that transition out of the Marine Corps into a civilian life, and was really looking forward, because looking back didn't feel good. But after Kabul fell 3 years ago, you couldn't not look back. I mean, it was in your face everywhere.
Do you listen to the Jordan Ellington episode?
I did, yeah.
And he was in your IOC class.
He was, yeah. I met him the first day of IOC when I had to, like, wrestle him halfway through this marathon day of all kinds of stuff.
He was my Navy football travel roomie.
Yeah, he was the guy I didn't want to wrestle, but sure enough,
Strong dude.
No, he's strong. He's a good dude, a good Marine. So yeah, I listened to his episode. I watched the Escape from Kabul documentary recently too, and I mean, I have so much respect for what he and his Marines did under those impossible conditions. Like, really, really impressive.
Yeah,
But
talk about a ultra maturity moment.
oh my gosh,
yeah,
in such a condensed timeline too. Like, you think a Marine going on a 7-month deployment has some growing up to do over that time. Like, think about these Marines who were just, like, dropped into a situation they had extremely little training for. And then in 17 days.
One of the things that was going through my mind while watching that documentary was sleep. And I'm like, there ain't no way I'm sleeping.
No.
And I don't think they did. Very few hours.
I mean, like, you sleep when your body, like, makes you sleep. Like, I imagine those are the moments where you sit down to write something, and then you trail off and you catch, like, a 15-minute nap until someone notices. Like, that's how Marine officers sleep in situations like that. Because how could you choose to when it's just madness all around you? Yeah.
So the fall of Kabul made you initiate the book.
Yeah, well, it was like, it was taken over my mind anyways. So I was, it was something that I'd kind of been avoiding visiting in detail, because it wasn't, like, a pleasant memory. But it coincided with the day I started my paid parental leave with my eldest daughter. She was, like, my wife went back to work, so my daughter was 4 months old, and we're in somewhat of, like, a napping routine. And so I had, like, a lot of this time to myself where I'm just thinking about this. And I had to turn off the TV because it really upset me just to hear, like, the talking heads, making partisan points as they display all this imagery. The blame game already starting, like, and then that conversation about, how could this happen? what could lead to this? It's like, well, anyone that was paying attention in the past 20 years knows the answer to that, but it's that story isn't being told. Um, so I went back and just looked at like my deployment in greater detail. I looked at the journal I kept at the time, emails that I'd sent people, some of the helmet camera footage that my doc and our JTAC both had shared with me before we parted ways after the deployment. And I think the perspective I had, well, let me first like say about the writing experience. Like, I wrote it just to like get it out of my head because it was so distracting. I felt like I wasn't present as a
Yeah,
parent, and that was like my full-time job. Like, I got this amazing benefit as a federal employee to take 12 weeks to just be a dad and like
that's nuts.
be there for my wife and
I
my
like it.
baby. Yeah, it was awesome. But like I couldn't even do that because my mind was elsewhere. So that
Yeah.
was, it was part of it was like I'm feeling so many different conflicted emotions. I'm thinking a lot of like incoherent thoughts. And I think that's because there is no like single pretty narrative. Like, there's no one person or thing you can blame. There's just so much going on, and I needed to sort through it for myself. So I just started writing.
Yeah. And I want to touch on that because I only started
Yeah.
writing like maybe a year and a half ago. I wish I'd been writing more often. I'm like, I'm going to remember this or whatever. Nope, you're not. There's going to
Yeah.
be some memory files you're going to be able to pick up. But, that was another thing. I knew this podcast was coming up. So yesterday, when I got home from work, I went through old photos of that deployment. Some I've never looked at.
Hmm.
And one of the guy I actually bought my AK from was a gunny
Really.
that deployed with us on that team. And he took some amazing pictures. And I finally went through all of those, and I'm like, they're so good. Like, they're helicopter shots on the aerial recon of the area. Like, you
Wow.
could zoom in from this aerial shot into the backyard of, of these Afghans. And I'm like, man, that's a good camera. But it was fun going through that. And right after reading
Yeah.
your book, going through those pictures, you were talking about at one point in the book, the red air and how the sandstorms sneak up.
Hmm.
I found one of those because we were out on a patrol, probably on the same Red Air Day, because that didn't happen a whole lot.
Yeah, there weren't. It was, feels like February 13, or were you there? Were you there that late?
Yeah, it was an entire year from
Okay.
because my son was born in July. Actually, remained behind for a couple of weeks after everybody went because my son was born. It was a July to July.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're probably there for that February. Maybe it was early March, but yeah, that was the only one when I was there.
Oh, I got the
Um,
picture and it's got a date on it, February 22nd.
there you go.
Yep.
So yeah, the photos are one of those things where like it's kind of like how I feel about my parents taking photos and videos when you're little. It's like get that out of here. Like, stop making me pose.
Yeah.
But then like now you're like 30 years later you're like, wow, these photos are amazing. I'm so glad they did this.
And
And that's how I feel at deployment too. I'm like, get this camera out of here. Like, I felt self-conscious like every time I took a picture on the deployment, like I was some kind of tourist.
yeah.
But I think it's important to like document that for yourself to look back
Yeah.
on, for your kids. Like, forget about like writing a book, but just having those images bring back so much of the memory,
At the
even without
same
writing about
time,
it. Yeah.
I'm kind of glad we didn't have camera access that current kids do today to,
Yeah.
going through the hooligan days. Glad
Right.
that one didn't happen for sure.
I'm with you there.
Nice. So that, why you wrote the book, got it. You talked about transition. Okay. I like to
Yeah.
touch on that one on these episodes too, because some of the people listen to it haven't done it yet. I did it. I did a 4-year active duty, knew I was going to get out. There was a drawdown, took a 2
Hmm.
years reserve for 1 year out of the active duty commitment, got into the oil field, transitioned there. And then I was like, oh, got to leave because oil's going down. And then I went into, big company sector of America. And that transition was different. For you, how was that transition? What did you transition to?
Yeah. So I was career designated out of the basic school, and so I thought like, hey, this is a career for me. Like, great. Um, you know, I kind of imagined myself staying in because I really loved the Marine Corps. I loved the Marine Corps history and legacy. But after that deployment, um, I still thought like, hey, I could stay in, but like, I want to come back and be an advisor again. I also had a medical issue going on. Like, I ate the Afghan food and it messed me up. And I know that the stress had a lot to do with that too, but I was never the same again. And I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So I knew I was being medically separated, not long after I got home, but that was okay with me because I decided pretty quickly after we got home that I was leaving the Marine Corps, whether it was, medical or elsewise, because uh, I was pretty upset with how we left things. As an advisor, we were the last advisor team to be with the Afghan Border Police down there at the edge of the fish hook, and we knew they weren't ready, and they told us they weren't ready, and they told us like we can't hold this ground once you guys leave. So I was feeling like this was all just a giant waste. Um, it was a waste of my time. It was a waste of the Marines who died to set up a foothold in Tagaz, the area where we were. It was a waste of the Afghans that died while we were there. The risks we took, like what were those all worth? And so I had this like really kind of sour taste in my mouth when we got home. And adding insult to injury, 5 days later, after we got stateside, was the Boston Marathon bombing. And that it was really what solidified for me, like, bombs are going off in America, and I'm out there in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan trying to do what that nobody cares about, that we're leaving, regardless of the impacts. Um, and meanwhile, like, the terrorism threat is still running rampant in America. So what was I doing halfway around the world if we still got like children dying in the streets here because of terrorism?
Yeah.
So that kind of shifted my focus for me, and that's when at the time I said, okay, I'm gonna go join the FBI. And so by the time the medical discharge process played out, it was another year. The FBI was on a hiring freeze. I don't know if it was like I think it wasn't just the FBI. I think a lot of federal agencies at that time. This was first half of 2014. So I knew that they're on a hiring freeze that whole time, but I was like, I still want to get there. What can I do in the meantime to make myself, the best FBI agent I can be? Um, so kind of like I did in college, I studied Middle Eastern Islamic Studies and Arabic in college, trying to get ready to be a good Marine officer deploying around the world. I'm getting out of the Marine Corps with the GI Bill. So what can I do to be a good FBI agent? So I took that that time when they were on the hiring freeze. I applied to graduate school. Ended up also applying to law school and doing a 4-year program. Burning through the GI Bill, getting some degrees to really prepare me for that next fight that I wanted to get
So
into.
you're a lawyer.
Yeah, technically.
Nice. I've gotten a lot of lawyers on here, so.
Oh, there's a lot of Navy football guys in the law now.
Yeah, I'm gonna need it at some point, so I got another one to call on.
Well, those are good friends to have.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I ended up making that transition. It was long, so like my transition was spread across 4 years of grad school where I was only responsible for myself, which felt amazing after being in the Marine Corps as an officer. Have that burden of leadership and responsibility kind of dissipate, and you're on your own. I was also around a lot of other veterans who were back at school too, which helped. I got a puppy and raised him into a dog, and like he was my buddy, so we were going through it together. I moved back to the same city where my girlfriend was, and ended up marrying her right after I graduated. So it kind of found a good transition period, but it was like I had 4 years, but pretty much to make that transition before I had to, be responsible for anything again and figure out this private sector. And I also chose an organization that feels really familiar to the Marine Corps. There's a ton of Marines in the FBI and other veterans. So
I remember TBS was right next to the FBI. I guess training center, right? Like
so, the FBI Quantico.
Can you talk about how that in-doc works?
So going back to Quantico, I've spent a year and a half of my life in Quantico, Virginia now at this point. So it was funny. I mean, I graduated law school and ended up, I took the bar and ended up getting a class date for the FBI Academy shortly after that. So I never had to go be a real lawyer. But it was funny going back to Quantico, checking in again in that student environment. It's, you got to swallow your humility to go back again. I think a lot about like Mustangs who you've already gone through boot camp, you've made it to the fleet, and now you got to go back through like a academy or OCS. Like you swallow your pride and you go back through it. So there was a lot
Did
of
you
that, but it was
course it
really,
again?
what's that?
You had to do the endurance course again?
Oh no, I stayed away from that. I knew
Okay,
it
didn't know if you had
you
to
know,
do that
I
again.
would have injured myself. We did some, there's definitely physical training. Um, but I was so kind of like how I felt at IFC, like I don't want to start over again.
Yeah.
More at the FBI Academy is more, I want to put my life on hold. Like I want to get, out into the field and start doing work again. And so I was very like, I'm not going to do anything extra to risk injuring myself. Um, sorry, I got to pop up here.
Oh, good. Smart,
So
by the way.
we're already doing like defensive tactics for like some days 4 hours a day. Like you're rolling on the mats, people are getting injured, and there's some crazy people that were like going out in town because they're like liked martial arts in their free time. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're gonna risk an injury out in town in your free time and like getting recycled and putting your
Yeah.
life on hold? I'm like, no sir, not me. So
They were probably like 24, 25 years old at the time.
exactly, yeah.
Good.
Um, So you'll learn one way or another, or maybe you'll get lucky.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it was funny. I remember like I'd drive out on weekends or evenings, and remember on Saturday mornings you'd see these lieutenants on the side of the road doing their remedial land nav because they'd failed it during the week, and I always chuckled whenever I saw them. Bring back those memories.
Gotcha. Well, cool. So transition, any special learning out of that transition?
I think like what helped me the most was finding my people. So
Okay.
I mean, there are a lot of other veterans who are making transition at the same time, and a lot of people come straight from college to law school. And for me, um, that kind of naivety towards the world, it kind of reminded me of the parts of myself that I had judgment towards, like, man, you just don't know yet. And
Yeah.
I was like that one day. um so there was a lot of that though that's not someone I want to hang out with, but there were in every class at least like 3 or 4 other veterans, and there were really good veteran supports groups. So when you can find your people, and even if you're in a new strange environment, um, even like I know in the private sector, there's a lot of veterans affinity groups at some of the law firms like I went to for a summer, and in private businesses. Like if you can find your people wherever you end up, like you can have someone to go through it with. Because like I
Yeah.
said, that's what helped me get through IOC is like the guys in front and in back and next to you,
Yeah.
saying
Brotherhood,
like, "Hey, man,
shared suffering.
exactly, yeah." So
Yeah.
same thing. If you can transition with someone, even if you're not like with them physically, but if you can just stay in touch with someone going through the same thing, um, it goes a long way till feeling like you're less alone, like you're less of an alien, um, less of a misfit when you're in a new environment. So I was able to do that thankfully, and then even in the FBI, there are tons of my people there.
Gotcha. Excuse me. Okay. So back to the book, kind of, you mentioned a little bit of this, I think, but how did the writing the book help you personally, other than, going through that time period, letting this stuff go, being present, and, it was on your mind. Is there anything else?
I think it helped me personally in a way that I felt I have like some record now. Um, and then the decision to publish it too is like, how they say when you're really mad, just like write an email but don't send it.
Hmm.
I got to tell you, man, sending that email feels really good. It
I
may be a
know.
little, it may be a little, yeah, yeah. From what you're telling me, it may be a little reckless. There may be consequences. And I was a little, nervous, especially given my current job, like putting 280 pages of my own words and experience out into the world that any old defense attorney can pick up and throw at me when I'm next on the stand testifying. Um, I was a little nervous about that, but I'll tell you, like being able to say your piece and put it out there into the world when you feel like that perspective isn't a part of the conversation, that felt really good. And it was a lot of work trying to get to a legitimate publisher. A lot of guys self-publish too, and that's great. But I wanted to find a way to get some good editing and
Yeah.
get a good publisher that would help with some real distribution. And then the other benefit to me that I think this started around the fall before I started writing, even that summer before Kabul actually fell, when you could kind of see things were deteriorating around the country. I started engaging with my former Marines and my old interpreter and just checking in on them in a little bit more substantive way than I had been. It'd been more of like a every Veterans Day or Memorial Day, like you send a text or an email.
Yeah.
You got a good strong dog there keeping you safe from whoever's trying to break in.
Yeah, she's about on her second life here pretty soon.
So yeah, I was engaging with these guys, and in after a decade or so of being like more surface level, it was really good to kind of have conversations on the phone instead of just a text or email, and to the guys on my team to like have them read a draft and tell me about their experiences and like what it brought up for them. To go visit my interpreter now where he's living and like be able to hold his daughter who's like the same age as mine. It was
Virginia by chance?
No.
Okay.
Farther from where I currently am, but
Gotcha.
another one of those population centers where there's a lot of Afghans.
Yeah.
So it's brought me together with those people from a time in my life where, because I didn't really want to visit that time in my life again, I hadn't really gotten anywhere beyond surface level with the people from that time in my life. So this project brought me closer with people that are important to me, and that was a benefit of writing it too. And they're all really supportive of publishing too, which obviously I was sensitive to, and changed the names of everyone that I didn't talk to about that project.
Yeah. Well, we outed Sully today, so
yeah, you outed him. I didn't do it.
Yeah, that's my fault.
I don't think there's anything for him to be too embarrassed about in the story. If anything, he's one of people's favorite characters from the feedback I've gotten. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I told him to buy it. I think he did, and I think he's going to work through it soon. So on the book, the themes that I took out of it, let's say there's 6 themes: sacrifice and service, costs of war, leadership under pressure, brotherhood and camaraderie. On the maturity side, delusionment and betrayal, maybe on a political standpoint, and moral ambiguity, which can go both ways. But I one of my key takeaways from that deployment was how to be embedded in a different culture, something you're totally not used to, and slowing down a little bit is one of them. Also understanding that flip side of the coin of values where yours may not match up quite the same. From when you wrote that book, what was your overall intent? I mean, I don't want to talk about a whole bunch of the details of the group unless you want to pull something out of it that you want to talk about. But other than it was good for you, it was fun to write. Kids are going to read it one day. Connecting with other people. What other intent and message would you like to share today from that?
So my main purpose of publishing was to set. It sounds really ambitious, to set the record straight. Obviously, I need a lot greater reach and a lot of people to pick up the book to have that kind of impact on the public record. But I needed to get my piece out there because I was so dissatisfied with the public discourse on Afghanistan and why we lost. And I thought that my perspective, and as I wrote this, I realized the value of my perspective was kind of representative of what was happening around the country. I'm distracted by that cute little kid you got there.
Yeah, she's growing up, man. Way too fast.
Amazing. So I really wanted to kind of correct the narrative, because the narrative that was coming out, in August 2021 was one of them was the Afghans didn't fight hard for their country. Another one was, the Biden administration totally pulled the rug out and it's all their fault, for summer of 2021. And then there's that counter narrative as well as the Trump administration negotiated for the surrender in Doha in 2020. And it was all just kind of partisan bickering. And there's elements to truth to both of those points, but that's not the end of the story. It's not even the beginning of the story. I thought the beginning of the story was happening while you and I were there in the country. And that experience that I had being with the Afghan Border Police as the last team of advisors to be there, my experience literally was the image of the Afghans as we left them. So
Yeah.
anyone that wants to understand, like, how come they weren't ready to fight on their own, I want them to read my story and see, like, because this is the level of training, this is their morale, this is their staffing. Even at the time when we decided this is good enough for us, we're out of here.
Yeah.
And I thought that telling that story would do some justice to the Marines who, you know, gave their lives, gave their limbs, their marriages, their sanity for this fight, and to honor the Afghans who, I mean, they fought hard. There more Afghans died in the last 2 years of the war than the Americans died in Vietnam.
Yeah. I couldn't even
But
imagine being in
yeah,
that war at my home.
yeah, and
You know?
it's not something they could, you know, do for 6 months and then go home and hang out for a year and train and then go back. Like where we were, the Afghan Border Police, they left their homes, their families in Lashkar Gah, and aside, it's the provincial capital of Helmand. And aside from getting leave to go home, for a week at a time, once a year, or, if you're injured, you get to go home to recuperate. They were in that fight indefinitely. Like that's your
And
life is,
deployed
is
all the
this
time.
fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so like that does a number to your morale, to your motivation. And when you're being asked to do a job that's supposed to be for 3 different Afghan patrolmen, or when your higher headquarters can't even be bothered to send a truck to empty the sewage tank or send a mechanic to repair your Humvee,
Yeah.
and you barely have enough ammo to sustain the fight. And that at that moment, the Americans are saying, "All right, you guys got this. We're out of here." Like some of them fought nobly, and the other ones, you know, they figured out what was best for them and their families, and they have a survival mentality. So it makes a lot of sense to me. Like for anyone that wants to characterize the Afghan security forces in one way or another, that they were all this, that they were all corrupt, that they were all lazy, that they weren't willing to fight, that's just flat out wrong. But again, those problems existed like in every organization. I think they were suffering especially because of the circumstances they were in.
Yeah.
So there were some real heroes out there that were like true believers that I loved working with them and fighting with them. Um, but then there were a lot of things working against the Afghan forces as a whole, that those people I loved working with couldn't get into a position of power or influence because they couldn't bribe the right official in Kabul to get a commission. There are some structural problems that like we couldn't change as, especially not as military advisors, but even as like Americans. Like this is in the Afghan law. Like we can't change that. So
Yeah.
that was frustrating to see, kind of part of the Afghans' own structure become their own worst enemy. And they had a lot of problems, but there were a lot of good people that put up a hard fight. And I really wanted to honor them, and also like just paint an honest picture without an agenda of trying to say like we can blame the Americans for leaving too soon, we can blame the Afghans for not fighting hard enough, we can blame this administration or that administration. I mean, anyone that's just trying to point a finger in one direction is just not being honest. And I really felt like I wanted to paint this honest picture of the situation on the ground as we left them. So that
Gotcha.
was really the purpose.
Perfect. Speaking of pointing the finger, corruption.
Hmm.
You think corruption's bad in our system? Man, over there, goodness gracious. I think I'm pretty sure the brigade commander that we were working with was selling bullets to the bad guys. And that's
Not
just
great.
one example. Did you have
Yeah.
any of those experiences there with a corruption standpoint?
Nothing we could prove. But I think the Afghans, by the time we got there in 2012, had kind of learned and figured out what Americans would tolerate and what would get them in trouble. Um, and even preparing for that deployment, like as I'm sure you prepared for yours, you're being taught like, okay, so you're going to need to figure out what your red line is. Um, you know, what are you going to stand up and say that I'm not okay with this, and what are you going to say is like, this culture is different and I need to
Yeah.
respect it.
Like the
So
man
that
love part of it.
yeah, that I mean,
Dude,
thankfully we
we
didn't
had
see
a
any of that,
we
but
had a soldier kill himself. I was in the tower, so you talk about standing watch. I was in
mhm.
the tower right there next to the A&A camp where we lived, and heard some gunshots. Turns out there was a guy that suck started a shotgun that was being abused by a
Yeah.
very high senior leader on that side of the wall, and that's that's different. I don't know. I don't know unless it's Diddy, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about pointing fingers and looking at our own society, man. I mean, we got problems too. I think
For
it's
sure.
at least it's not tolerated here, in the same
Yeah.
way that if not for the American presence on some of those bases, I think there would have been taken more liberties. Um, really, just an insidious part of backward part of their culture. I try not to be too judgmental about other cultures, but that's something where I can say like, that's not a difference I'm going to
There's a red
respect.
line.
Yeah, that's a pretty clear red
You can
line for
draw
me.
that one.
Yeah,
All
but I
right.
mean, as far as like one of the commanders I know was doing drugs, um, and then some of like what we consider corruption, they just consider like rank has its privileges. Like if I'm the commander here, I get to sell the fuel that we got. The government fuel that we have, I get to sell that to the locals and pocket the profit. That's
Yeah.
just rank has its privileges, and to us, it's like, no, you're going to get court-martialed if you do that.
It's like
But for them,
the
it's like that's like this is why you become an officer. This is one of the perks.
financial / admin guy saying, "Oh, we've got X amount of positions here. Here comes
Yeah,
the money. All right, we
yeah,
only here dish it out to 50% of them, and
yeah.
50% that's filled, right? Because manpower is an issue
Right.
that
Yeah.
you
I
talk
mean, there
about in the
there were
book.
definitely some ghost soldiers on the rolls out
Yeah.
where I was. Um, yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking about the corruption in their culture is something we consider corruption, but like the fact that you need to pay someone to get a commission as an officer, um, that frustrated me. And I was like, the sergeant that I really admired and liked working with told me he's like $2,000, and I could go be an officer because I was like, what can I do to like help you advance your career and like be more than a sergeant? Like you should be leading. Like you're a better leader than the commander here. He's like, I don't have $2,000 to pay the right guy in Kabul. Like all the Ministry of Interior, they can't even reassign a lieutenant to a different position within, a battalion level force there, the Kandex,
Yeah.
without someone at the Ministry of Interior signing off. And so I was, well, that needs to change. Like they should be able to approve that at lower levels. In my head, I'm thinking, well, maybe that lower level, that guy's just lining his pockets now. And this is just kind of the price of admission for them to become an officer. Um, not to get, like I said, every time you point a finger, there's three more pointing back at you. I think about our own officer corps and
True.
the cost of getting a college tuition to get your degree before you can commission. And there's some barriers to entry here too. So as much as it's pay to play over there, you know, we have our own kind of hurdles that need to be overcome, and a lot of that's financial for folks. So
Yeah.
again, yeah, that's one of the areas where I don't have as much judgment. You know, that's part of their culture and their law. It's shooting themselves in the foot because lower level commanders can't get the right people into the right place. But it didn't quite upset me as much as the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, cool. Mentor. You mentioned in the book you had a mentor, but in general, do you have a good mentor, maybe one or two?
Yeah, I've got like a career mentor. There aren't a lot of people, and the FBI is pretty small. There aren't a lot of agent attorneys, uh, but there's only like two others from the same law school as me, and I connected with them while I was still in the hiring process. So one of them's been a pretty good mentor, career wise, and that's again just about like finding your people. And like there's not going to be a lot of people where you are, so you're lucky if there's someone that's willing to take on that role for you as you transition and start somewhere new. And that's kind of motivated me too to want to be a mentor for other people and help them figure out where to go and be a resource. Um, the mentor I mentioned in the book was a college professor of mine who really helped me think about on a deep level about who I wanted to be in the world, thinking about service, thinking about family, legacy, all those kinds of things that they're almost embarrassing to say out loud. But he kind of created this environment in our seminars discussing literature and art and music and philosophy and theology. It was a really awesome seminar, and I still talk to him. I talked to him a few weeks ago on the phone. We stay in touch. He's retired now, but I think it's important for people to find someone that creates that space where it might be embarrassing to talk about things that deep out loud. But when you're comfortable with someone and they're not going to be laughing when you say like, what's the legacy I want to leave in this world, when they're taking you seriously and helping you think like, what are you going to do with your limited time here? Like
Mhm.
it's important to have someone like that. So
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to find that person in college. And then, he wasn't in the military at all. He was a college professor, like academic, but he helped me figure out how to think about what I wanted to do. And that being able to discern your path helps you when it comes to those transition points. Like you're getting out of the military, it helps to check in with yourself and think about like, okay, I'm at a decision point. Which way do I want to go? Like you're in America, you're a military veteran, like the world is yours. Like you can go do and be anything that you want, but like, how do you figure out what that is? And for me, it was like, I know I need to serve. Like I want to serve my community. At the time I was getting out, like I didn't have a family yet. So I think that does change like how you serve and who you serve, and your priorities will evolve as your life situation evolves.
Yeah.
So like now, I've got competing priorities. It's not just your career in serving the public. But like I want to be the best husband I can. I want to be the best dad. And like that's part of the legacy I want to live. I don't care about fancy titles and awards, in
Yeah. It's
the
being the
military.
best
Like,
you can be and
yeah,
whatever that is.
yeah,
I'll be
because
the
at the end of
best
the day,
I can
like,
be.
I had a supervisor who's also a Marine veteran, my first supervisor in the Bureau. He said to me, like, listen, man, and it was right after I don't know, this was before I think my wife was pregnant at the time. He said to me, like, I was working late, taking my cases really seriously, um, being really thorough. And I had a problem. Like, I can't leave work to be done on the plate and go home for the day and like relax. Like, I need to finish up everything I can and like set the leads out before I go home. And he came around, it was like 6:30 one night. He's going home. He's like, Chris, the FBI is not going to wipe your ass when you're 80.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, pay attention to your family. Like, it was kind of like a wake up call to me. He didn't need to say more than that. It's just like, go home,
Yeah.
be with your people, like prioritize those relationships. Like your family is going to be with you long after you face mandatory retirement. In the Bureau for Agents, it's 57. So like, what do you want to go home to when you're 57? Like there's other agents that can work this mission. We always work as a team, and it's like thinking about like what legacy do you want to have? Like no one, if you leave at 6 instead of 6:30, like sometimes you can't. Sometimes you don't leave at all. Sometimes you sleep
Yeah.
in the office. But on the days when you can, it's like, yeah, you gotta get your priorities right. So
I think
that was something I struggled with early on. Yeah.
the biggest teacher for me on that subject has probably been my body's need for sleep. It's like, all right, you're going to shut down. You're going to have to go to sleep and get this amount of rest in order to be effective the following day. And that's the
Exactly.
thing, like as you age, changes
But
because
yeah,
you're not
the
that
need
young.
changes,
Yeah,
but it's also one of those maturity things. Like
true.
when you're a brand new officer, fresh out of basic school or MOS training, and you believe you're superhuman, and you think like, I'm just not going to sleep. I've pulled 2 all-nighters in a row before. Like I know I can do it, but like, do you, now that you're older, you can look back and be like, well, listen, like your Marines deserve the leader that you are in the level of your executive functioning when you're well rested. That's the leader that they deserve.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can't get disease, and that's fine. You
You're making,
press and yeah, but to it was like the culture of my battalion. When I came back from that deployment, it was like people are paying attention to like whose cars are in the parking lot and at what time they leave, and people are like keeping tabs on just merely being there instead of like, well, what are you doing when you're there? It's the same thing. Like you think there's some amount of pride in not sleeping and just being awake and saying like, well, I didn't sleep at all. Like, well, what kind of leader are you? What kind of parent are you when you're not sleeping? And who is that serving to say you just didn't do that? I mean, you got to know yourself and know when you're becoming ineffective, and then carve out that time to like recharge, because the people you care about in your life, they deserve the best version of yourself, and nobody's the best version of themselves if you're sleeping for 2 hours a night, weeks on end.
Yep. Know yourself and seek self-improvement, right?
There it is.
All right. A few more. We'll wrap this thing up. So for you, biggest perceived failure, success stories are fun. That's the short you flip through. Oh, success. Tell us about that failure, biggest learning from that failure. I say failure, it probably wasn't, but what was that for you?
Where I felt like a failure as a Marine officer was kind of being over familiar with my men, and sometimes I wasn't the disciplinarian that they needed me to be, and I do view that as like part of my failure as a Marine officer. Sometimes I feel like I wasn't cut out to be an officer because I like the men too much. I didn't want to be the bad guy, and it wasn't so much a desire to be liked; it's just like more conflict avoidant. So I've definitely learned from that. I mean, there's one time, one of my Marines, he was like wearing headphones up in the turret, listening to music when we were on a convoy, and I didn't know about it until I think our XO or our overall team leader found out and like really dressed him down. And I felt like, man, that's on me. Maybe I didn't inspect this guy, but like that could have legitimately caused harm. And they need a leader who's going to. They don't need a friend, right? Your Marines have friends. They need someone who's going to take care of them for the ways that they need, not that they want. So I felt I might have gotten overly comfortable with these guys. I didn't want to like be the guy reaming them out for rolled their sleeves up a little bit, or didn't shave that morning, stuff that you need a good sergeant major to go around and getting everyone's shit all the time. I didn't want to be that guy. I wasn't comfortable in that role, but I know that it kind of gave the impression that the standards weren't going to be enforced to the degree that they should have been. So I think that's one of my weaknesses as a Marine officer. Why I felt like I wasn't kind of cut out to stay in Marine Corps Officer Corps. In addition to like wanting to be like on the ground with the guys doing the mission, I know that the more time you spend in, the more rank you accrue. Those opportunities go away. So Justin North, another one of the guys you've had on here, good buddy
Tell
of
me
mine.
about what's your relationship with him. He and I go
Oh
way
man,
back.
yeah. I mean, talk about that dog I got when I was getting out. He was getting out. Actually, he wasn't getting out at that time. He was going to Recruit Depot, San Diego. He was a series commander. But we got puppies from like the same breeder. He and I were like in the same fire team at IOC, and I was his fire team leader. They're permanent billets that they assigned there.
Same IOC. Was he in our TBS class or?
No, he wasn't. He was he was in the golf company. I think a class before us.
Okay,
Or
so he
maybe
got
two.
injured or something. Maybe had to wait. Or
No, I think he'd be comfortable me sharing this.
okay, I remember now.
Yeah, you remember. Yeah, he suffered a really severe personal loss, and they gave him kind of some convalescent time. So I didn't know that about him until probably like we were like literally me and him were like putting a tarp above our heads in the woods, sharing that together, and that's how close we were. And for 2 months, I didn't like of IOC. I didn't really know that was going on for him.
Justin North was a bowling ball Smash mouth, helmet, head,
I know.
knocker.
Yeah. I love them to death.
Yeah.
Um, so I was this fire team leader at IOC. So even now, still, like, I'll text them on a Sunday night and be like, "Hey, man, make sure you get your hair cut," because that's the level of like just tediousness that student leadership roles in a training environment will. That's your job, is to text someone a reminder to like do what they're supposed to do, and you treat them like a child.
Yeah.
Again, stuff like that I didn't really like doing. I didn't really view that as part of my leadership style. Um, but Justin always called me the most overqualified fire team leader in the Marine Corps, because when I deployed, I saw him in Leatherneck too. I'm a lieutenant. I've got 3 Marines under me, so I'm like literally a fire team leader, because that's what I had on the task org of our advisor team. And I've got a 203, just like I had at IOC. Like,
Yeah, which is not normal.
no, not normal at all. But that's kind of where I felt comfortable. Like, I really liked small unit leadership, being close with the people that you're in it with together. So um, that's one of the things I like about the bureau, is like there's no up or out. You don't have to progress along a career path and advancement, or you're a failure and have to get out. Like, if you like your job, you stay in it. You can put in the hours. You can make a career out of any position. You can stay in the fight for as long as I want. And it's important to take breaks and uh, take a different role. Like, you don't want to burn out in any job you are. So I think like the concept of like officers having B billets, um, taking time to work on yourself and develop, and then get back in better qualified. I think that's really healthy for a career. It's really healthy for a person and their own development. It's good for families too, to take some time like that. Um, but the fact that you can go right back, like, could you imagine, like, if you had the option right now to go back and be a platoon commander?
I
It'd
wouldn't
be
do.
so. You
Yeah.
wouldn't do it.
I know.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
would. I would die
all right. So not whether or not you could, but
physically.
physically, yeah. I couldn't either. Um, but people love those jobs where you're like at the front lines, like where the rubber meets the road,
I I
leading the
know where
men
you're
out.
going. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I would love it, but
yeah.
yeah, it would
Like
hurt.
that I love that, and the idea of I had to get out anyways medically, and I wanted to get out also because that point in time in my life with the Boston Marathon bombing coinciding with the end of that deployment. But I don't think I would have been any good in any staff role. I'd just be itching to, like, I'd be the guy who's like coming around at the patrol base, like, what's the battalion XO doing out here? Oh, he just wanted to go on patrol with you guys. Well, that's not his job. Like, I know, like, I wouldn't be able to help myself
Yeah.
from just wanting to get back into it at that level. So that's just me. That's something I've learned about myself, having gone through that experience.
I skipped over it. I don't know why, but FBI. Let's go there. Tell us as much as you
Yeah.
can about what you do today.
So yeah, so I am a special agent. I'm also an attorney. I spent the first 5 years of my career, and I can say this because it's been in unsealed court documents. Um, I spent the first 5 years on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So um, I investigated all kinds of crimes and worked on all kinds of cases, but my primary assignment was working terrorism. Um, so I really liked that, but it burnt me out big time. A couple big cases that
Probably a
you know,
lot to do.
yeah, and I mean, coinciding with like having 2 kids since
Yeah.
I started there. So I recently just talk about a B bill. Like, I just took um, every field office has a lawyer to 1 to 5, depending on the size of the office. So your full time job is to be like in house counsel and do like internal legal reviews, and people ask you questions and they ask you for advice and guidance, and you have to sign off on certain types of investigative techniques that people want to use, and provide training on privacy and civil liberties, and um, ethics, and all kinds of stuff that's important to the everyday functioning of the bureau. And so right now I'm in that position full time. It's kind of like a B billet, um, and it's really good right now for my family to be able to take a step back from the operations, take a breath, be around. Now that we've got 2 little kids, and my wife works full time too, so it's like this is the right balance for me right now. But I'm still thinking about, like, okay, in a couple more years, I'm gonna get back in the fight, and be refreshed and ready. And I'm
Yeah.
learning so much now in my current role that I'm going to be much better when I get back in. So
Yeah, like
that's
Clint
kind of
Bruce
where
would
I'm.
say, you're in the reload phase.
Exactly. Yeah. And I still feel like I'm touching a lot of cases, doing like a lot of good work, helping agents solve problems. Um, and I do enjoy that part of it because I spent 3 years in law school, essentially like learning a trade,
Yeah.
learning how to read opinions, learning the nuances and intricacies of the Fourth Amendment and interrogation law and like all that kind of interesting stuff to me. And now that's my day in, day out. People come ask me questions like, hey, I want to do this. Like, I'm having a problem with the prosecutor. They like, can you talk to them?
Yeah.
Um, and not
Valuable skill set.
just, yeah. So in every kind of case now too, like whether it's public corruption or violent crimes against children or gangs or counter espionage,
You
I,
working
I
on
get to,
Venezuela? Venezuelan gangs in Colorado?
I told you I can't talk about
I know,
ongoing
I
bureau
know. I tried.
matters or potential ongoing bureau matters.
Understood. I had to try.
But yeah, it feels good to kind of branch out beyond where I was kind of, pigeonholed into one thing to be learning a lot and affecting a lot of different cases.
Cool. So you're not going to sign up for the Secret Service? I know they need some people. We saw it all over the news. Okay.
You're not going to get anything else out of me.
Biggest struggle you're working through today?
Oh, honestly, it's I've kind of figured out the biggest struggle that I have had until I just moved into this position was trying to figure out what those right priorities were between work and the mission and my family. So I'm in a position right now where I've kind of settled that, where I'm more in like a typical business hours job, and I still get phone calls or have to log into my computer after hours on occasion, depending on people that need support. But when I'm home now, I get to be present. So my biggest challenge is raising children, as
Yeah,
you know
figuring
well.
out how to do that right.
Yeah, it's right. And I mean, the Marine Corps,
Bold there.
yeah, the Marine Corps teaches you leadership, and it does not teach you like how to be a parent. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what could, beside every kid's different too. Like you can read the books, you can listen to the podcasts, you can, like me, marry a psychologist who is super smart on all this, but then when the problem's right there with you and you're emotionally involved,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a wonderful thing. It's a struggle. It's a beautiful struggle, and but it is hard, especially when they're bringing home viruses from daycare. And my older girl, she's so intelligent that you think you're having a conversation, she understands it. Her she's probably beyond her years when it comes to just like sheer intelligence. But then when it comes to like emotional development, she's still a 3-year-old, and like trying to manage that when it's not something that can be rationally managed, it's hard, and it's hard, and it's humbling, and
Yeah.
that's what I do appreciate. It's like no matter, you can be a combat veteran, you can go get a fancy degree, you can work and be this hard charger, but like your kids, they're gonna humble you, and you're gonna be covered in their shit and snot, and like none of that other stuff matters. Like your problem's right in front of you, and the
Yeah.
problem is also like the greatest blessing in the world. So
And we're problem
yeah,
solvers by nature, right?
yeah,
All the way from, through college to the Marine Corps to the transition to the jobs after that, whatever. And then you got kids and you just want to
yep,
solve the problem. And it's like, nope, time's just going to be
yeah.
your ally on this one.
Yeah,
So
the
don't
time
solve it.
time is going to solve the problem. You just got to sit
They
there
just got to
and
figure it out on their own. Touch that
do.
hot stove.
Yeah,
See what happens.
yeah, yeah. Some of those lessons they just got to learn the hard way. But yeah, it's a challenge, man. But it's good. It's good.
Good deal. When you lost your mail out of the book and you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I think Marine Corps birthday time and y'all lost your mail. I
Yeah,
found your mail.
you found
So
it.
I was, yeah, well, Sullivan,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's like, hey, I think our mail's up there, lost somewhere. I ended up finding and getting to you guys. So,
Much appreciated, man. That's a huge morale boost.
yeah. Last question. What's your price of admission?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this because it's a big question. I think my answer is that the price of admission is a blank check. And I don't mean that just in the obvious way, like when we sign up for the military and you are saying like, I'm willing to give it all. It's the unexpected ways where you haven't even considered it. Like, what if you only have to pay a little bit and you wanted to pay more and you feel like I got away with it? And I feel that way sometimes about my service in the Marine Corps. Like, I feel like I didn't get to give enough. I didn't get to make a difference. I thought I was going to be able to make a difference. But the blank check you write is like, you don't get to decide what your billet's going to be. There, so many things are dictated by circumstance. And that's part of that maturity and acceptance that I feel like I gained from that deployment. Is it's like, you don't get to decide like whether or not you're going to be able to help these Afghans for as long as you want. Like, it's out of your control.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do with that? And so for me, it's like, I thought when I was joining the military that I could write this blank check, do my time, maybe give it all, maybe get wounded, like maybe just do a great job and have an experience that I'd carry with me. But I also never considered like that blank check, like it might not be worth anything. Like you can give so much. In August 2021, I mean, every veteran in Afghanistan saw everything we gave get kind of washed away. And I don't mean that to minimize, the things that Marines and coalition partners, like the things we did for each other, like the men that came home because other men and women were willing to like put themselves on the line to protect their brothers and sisters. Like all of that is honorable and worthwhile. But I think the feeling that I felt in August of 2021, seeing how Afghanistan ended, was like, I kind of felt that at the time, but I didn't want to admit it. Like this wasn't worth it. To feeling like, well, now everyone can see, like, what did we get? What did we get with that blank check? We got like a temporary reprieve of oppression in a country on the other side of the world, and that's it. And now it's back to where it was before we went in there. So I also think like, I thought that you could write that check one time and be satisfied. I thought I would serve and then I would go focus on, a life in the private sector and just indulge myself in all that America had to offer. But after the military service, I felt like I hadn't given enough and I still had more to give. And that's just, I think, who I am. It's like, that's how I conceptualize myself, is like, I'm a public servant, and I think I always will be. I don't think you can just cut that check one time. Like you cut it every day you wake up. Like, how am I going to make myself better? How am I going to help my neighbor? How am I going to be the best husband or best father that I can be? Like, how am I going to be the best FBI agent I can be at work today? It's not like something you can do one time and then be like, all right, I paid my dues. There's always more that you can be doing. And I think there's a lot of people will look back and say like, I did this, so, thank me for my service. It's like, no, man, that's not what you did yesterday. Like, what are you doing today? And that, I think, is like the price. Like you got to keep paying it.
Awesome. Got to keep paying it. Sham freaking wow. Well, dude, really appreciate your time today. It was a good one. It's fun talking to you about the book. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And tell the family thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Because I know you are busy balancing all the fun and games on the weekend, learning and growing.
Yeah.
So got to cut it every day. So
absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was great catching up with you, Tony. And I really appreciate what you're doing with your podcast. It's awesome.
I enjoy it, and thank you for getting on today, being part of it.